Hello and welcome back to Dave's Movie Diary. Today I'm talking about another film from Iranian filmmaker Abbas Kiarostami. Apologies up front for the shocking pronunciation, which I'm sure it is. The Wind Will Carry Us from 1999. Recently I watched Taste of Cherry. That was a rewatch. I'm pretty sure I've never seen The Wind Will Carry Us before, but I was in the mood for more, and it's on Mubi at the moment. Really good place to get world cinema. Once again, it's a really simple film. Well, the plot is anyway. I shouldn't call it a simple film. The premise is a simple one, and Kiarostami relies on just observing everyday life rather than making something happen. So yeah, let's get into it. What happens in this film? Basically, an engineer from Tehran arrives with a couple of unseen colleagues in a remote village somewhere in Iran. And officially they're there to research local customs. But gradually, we as the audience realize that they're actually waiting for an elderly woman to die so that they can document the village's mourning rituals. Slight hitch is that she's stubborn and is hanging on. She appears to be around 100 years old. But anyway, what begins as a waiting game slowly becomes something else. And he's stuck there, this engineer. His colleagues sort of recede into the background. We don't really see them again. It just centers on the main character, and he starts to basically settle into the rhythms of this little village that's cut into the side of a hill, literally. And he spends his days chatting with the locals, wandering the narrow laneways, forming connections, driving up a nearby hill again and again to receive mobile phone calls from Tehran. And he starts to become a part of this community that he never intended to know. And the longer the film goes on, the less important his original assignment becomes to him, for sure. His colleagues are fairly keen to get back to their lives, but he seems happy to linger there. And that's basically it. Like I said, the plot is not the main point of watching this film. It's to get caught up in the rhythms of what Kiarostami's trying to show us about everyday life and reflect. I sort of went into Kiarostami's career previously in Taste for Cherry, but his key films are really these two, Close Up, which I think was an earlier film, which I haven't seen, and Certified Copy, which is a later film, which I also haven't seen. But these two films taken as a whole, he's interested in using long takes, the natural environment, real landscapes, getting performances from his actors which seem to be unrehearsed, and just focusing on their conversations over any real moments of action. And it's up to us as the audience to complete the gaps ourselves. And I guess one thing that I realized after watching this not too much later than Taste of Cherry is how complementary they are. Taste of Cherry is really centered on one man searching for someone to help him die, whereas The Wind Will Carry Us really is a celebration of everything that keeps people living. So I had quite a few impressions of this one. Straight away, when the film starts, we're back among familiar grounds for me with Kiarostami. Dusty roads, winding hills, immediately took me back to Taste of Cherry, the endless maneuverings of Mr. Buddy in that one, driving around. The landscape here is different, though. The countryside is lush and green and really beautiful, actually. Until you get to the village. The village is just carved into this hillside with brutal stone structures that look like they've been there since time began. No vegetation there. It's a communal space just for living. Quite a striking contrast, I thought. Life in the village. I'm just fascinated to see how different people in the world live. They make use of every bit of space. I've seen this in my travels throughout Asia as well. But here, the flat rooftops become living spaces, and I know that's something that's common to the Middle East. But yeah, I mean, why not? You see them up there. There's a mother there with the children doing normal everyday chores. Children are everywhere in this, as you'd expect in Iran. I don't know what the stat was or if it's still true, but I remember at one point I think they had a higher percentage of people under 15 or 20 or something than anywhere else in the world. There's animals wandering around freely, and we just get a really great look at these daily routines unfolding naturally. Nothing staged. It's nearly like a documentary. But the stranger stands out, the engineer, our protagonist, and as soon as he comes there, everyone's sneaking glances at him. The young people are sort of looking at him and then looking away. The older people just have these inscrutable, gazes that look like they're looking into the horizon. But everyone's keen to see him because he's from the modern world. And most of these people appear as though they've never left the village. It kind of reminded me of traveling through Western China about 25 years ago when I went there for the first time, and I got the sense then that people there had hardly seen any foreigners in the flesh, and I had to get used to people looking at me like this, like I was an alien. And it's a real challenge. I'm used to it now. I've been back countless times, but I could it didn't bother the protagonist in this film, especially because he thinks he's only there for a few days, but it turns into a few weeks. But anyway, I kind of relate to that feeling. This is a really good time capsule for 1999, I thought. The biggest thing was the phone reception. And the mobile phone that he's using nearly looks the same as the old Nokia brick that I had back in the mid to late 90s with a tiny battery and really bad reception, even in Sydney back then. The pull-out aerial, and they were everywhere, ubiquitous they were. And I hardly ever used mine. I don't know why I haven't got it, actually. Just got stuck in a bag somewhere at the end of the day. But yeah, they were quite the rage there for a while. But anyway, our protagonist has got one. He gets lots of phone calls. He gets a few calls a day, and it starts ringing. His phone starts ringing in the village. Trouble is, there's no reception. So he's got to tell them, hey, stay on the line. Quickly jumps in the car. It looks like a 5 or 6 minute drive. Down, up and down the valley, up this hill, through the two trees. I got to know this hill really well. Through these two trees and up to the apex of the hill, near another tree where he would take the call. Usually it was someone called Mrs. Gaddazi that seemed to be inquiring about what was going on. And there's some frustrations there that things weren't moving along quickly enough. But while he was up there, he forms a critical relationship with a guy who's digging a ditch. And he eventually gets to the point where he takes a sip of tea from the guy's pot there by the fire. And there's a really critical plot point later on when our protagonist goes up to the hill to take a call and finds that the hole has filled in, and his friend is probably asphyxiating slowly. So he races down the other side and gets a lot of help from the locals. gets a doctor. Quite an interesting scene, actually, but that's probably the most action-filled thing that happens, actually, in the plot. But yeah, just that phone and the lack of reception is heartwarming to see someone else going through the dramas that I went through. Difference being, of course, he's in the middle of nowhere. I was in a big city and still couldn't get reception. Love the rhythm of this film, and I fell into it myself. I got used to the plot kind of taking a back seat, I guess, to the rhythm. The performances kind of recede away as well, because it just feels like you've been transported into this village along with this character. So it's just that routine. Take a call, drive uphill, talk, speak with the ditch digger, drive back down. There's a pregnant woman that he speaks to, and they have quite a funny conversation. And then there's also the young schoolboy who appears at the start of the film to help him with his car that's overheating. He becomes like a link between the engineer and the other people in the village. They have their ups and downs in their relationship. Checks in on his colleagues. They hardly seem to leave their room except to go out and buy strawberries. They get frustrated at not being able to return home. Rinse and repeat. It's kind of the same thing. Check out the room with the blue window where the old lady is. Not much activity there. And day after day, I began to anticipate these encounters, nearly as the engineer was. And just getting back to those scenes with the young woman who's pregnant, fantastic dialogue between the two. Simple conversations, but a lot going on underneath. A lot of gentle humour. The exchange goes something like this, that she says, "Nothing happens in winter." And he says, "Oh, I think something does. The seed is planted in winter and it's harvested in summer." They're talking about farming, but they're also talking about the birth and life process. And life quietly continues. And Kiarostami constantly adds deeper meaning to these ordinary conversations. It's really subtle and brilliant. And then the next day, the engineer wanders along and finds the woman and thinks he's talking to the sister, because this woman isn't pregnant. No, she's had the baby. She's already back. She's just acting like nothing's happened. She's got 5 boys, 5 girls. No big deal. Move on. He asks her if there's going to be any more in his own subtle way, and she says, "Well, how would I know?" Life in the village just keeps moving along. I also loved. There's a great scene where the protagonist is shaving. He's got his shaving cream and he's just running the razor across his face into a mirror. The camera becomes the mirror, and we just watch him carrying on a conversation in between strokes of the razor with the woman that I was just referring to behind. And I hadn't seen that done before with shaving anyway. And you watch him feeling on his face. He thinks he's cut himself, and then he hasn't. Just these everyday things that look different or feel different when you see them framed in a different way. And just another example of Kiarostami turning everyday life into cinema. I also like the scenes with the ditch digger. He's one of the film's, again, memorable recurring characters. Just these simple conversations. The engineer is always sort of probing, and again, I know I said it on an earlier pod, but it reminded me of Andrew Urban's Front Up series here in Australia on SBS. Just talking to ordinary people, but asking questions. I think we're always so focused on what we're going to say and what we're thinking about that the joy is asking questions. You know about your experience. Why not find out about someone else's, especially in this fish out of water scenario, when he's from the city and he's there. He's interested in their customs and their lives, and they open up to him. Just like the young girl that milks the cow for him down in the cave. Found that really interesting. I couldn't work out why the cow was down there in the cave. You never see a face, and he offers to pay for the milk, and then she says, "No, you got to pay my mum. Go upstairs and pay my mum." And he goes upstairs and asks how much it is, and he gets told, and he pays. And then the young woman comes up and says, "Why did you accept his money?" And she goes, "He was willing to pay." And then the old woman calls him back, and they have this exchange where she gives the money back, and he accepts it, and just brilliant, just like in real life. And that's another example of the protagonist becoming part of the village, and that was my big favorite takeaway from the film. He's just there as a visitor. He's waiting. Probably a little bit bored at first, but he quickly finds ways to amuse himself and get into it. By the end, he's really living there, and no one's really taking much notice of him. So without ever announcing it, Kiarostami shows us that the engineers become accepted by everyone there. And that routine has created belonging. The actor who plays our protagonist is called Behzad Durrani, and I thought he was perfect. He gives a really wonderful, understated performance. He's curious. He's occasionally amused. I like how he tries to take a photo of the woman who runs the little makeshift cafe, and she tells him, no photos. He takes another couple, and she gets a bit more annoyed, and so he puts the camera inside its case and on the table, and a bit of a larrikin in a really subdued kind of way. Interesting character, but never exaggerated. He spends most of his time in the film listening and watching and reacting. And I could see the city kind of leaving him behind, and that original purpose fading away. Brilliantly done, seamlessly. And I got to thinking that the film's really about, okay, so it's about waiting for someone to die, but that's really just the premise to get us into this situation. Look at children and birth, work, conversation, routine, life quietly unfolding. It shouldn't work, should it? But it does. And it's another brilliant Kiarostami idea that some of the film's most important characters are never shown. We only hear them. And it kind of forces us to imagine them ourselves. And it's just another little interesting thing that I thought of. Why is it called The Wind Will Carry Us? I didn't appreciate this until I looked it up. It's taken from a poem by the great Iranian poet Farrokhzad. Again, I can't pronounce these names. That's on me. And apparently, her poetry often explored life and mortality and love and the passing of time, which is what this film's really all about. So it really makes sense. The passing of time, people waiting for someone to pass on. Our protagonist waiting for another phone call, waiting for something to happen, but life goes on. People keep their routines going. So look, is it a date film? Probably not. It's too reflective, unless your date really loves world cinema and slow, reflective storytelling. It's not a hangover film either, I don't think. It's too subtle and observational, rewards your full attention. It's a watch-alone film, I think, where you can get lost in your thoughts, reflect. I did. I like I said, I really enjoyed it. Similar to Taste of Cherry. Less interested in coming out and entertaining you, but making you think about just ordinary life. So I do think this film's warmer than Taste of Cherry, obviously. It's not, even though death is at the heart of both films, this one's more routine. It's gentler. It's a bit more humorous. Community is a bigger part. But by the end, I really felt like I'd been living in this village, and that's no small achievement, really. So again, the comparison makes me think that Taste of Cherry left me with the idea that if we leave, we lose the taste of cherries. But The Wind Will Carry Us kind of suggests something a bit more, equally profound, I guess, is that life isn't found in that thing we're waiting to happen, but it's found in everything that's happening while we're waiting, while life's going along. So that's probably what I'll take away most from this film. So yeah, that's it. A good, calming, reflecting film in amongst some of the other crazy things that we all enjoy watching. Check it out if you can. The Wind Will Carry Us from 1999. It's available on Mubi. It's probably available on Criterion Channel and other places if you look for it. So yeah, thanks as always for joining in, and see you next time.